welcome back to our YouTube channel, CF Corner. Now, as you know, CF Corner is a YouTube platform for create and finish company. And then if you did miss our last upload, okay, our very first video, more like an introductory video on what this channel is all about. Okay, the link we posted right there in the description. Do go and hit on that link and then go watch and be welcome. But then you are still welcome. Welcome. Okay, now having said that, I will encourage you to please hit on the subscribe button and of course the notification bell such that you get formally notified anytime new videos are uploaded right here in this channel. Okay, now today the topic before me is in real estate. We're taking a topic in real estate, and that topic is land titles in Nigeria. Now, the importance of land titles can never be overemphasized. Before acquiring any property whatsoever, it's very imperative that you make adequate verifications. Ask questions, try and know, okay, try and verify what title is behind that property you're trying to acquire. Okay, now if you neglect this, as many people have done, you're going to find yourself into serious problems. A lot of people have run into problems like losing investments, losing huge sum of money. Okay, a lot of people have been sent to depression. A lot of people have been embroiled in unnecessary litigation. A lot of people have actually lost their lives. So if you do not want to be found in any of these positions, it's very imperative that you ask questions. Okay, if you are trying to acquire from a company, you need to ask questions. You need to make research. Okay, go deep and search through and know what that company is actually standing for. Even if they tell you that this is the title that is behind this property, you need to ask, what impact does this title have on this property? Okay, so if you try and do all these things, you'll find out that it will be very difficult for you to fall into the hands of fraudsters, charlatans, or scammers. Okay, so I encourage you, if you're a newbie out there, you're trying to go into real estate or anything that has to do with property, lands, and whatever. Okay, you really want to stick to the end of this video so that you can get adequate information. You can know what and what is involved. Okay, so the long and short of all I'm saying right here is that you need to verify, you need to know. Okay, know what title is behind any property and then make adequate research concerning that title. Okay, so doing, you will not find yourself into serious problems. Okay, now going further, I'll go ahead and define what land titles are. Okay, and further give you the different types of land titles we have in Nigeria today. Now, before I start defining what land titles are and the different types of land titles we have in Nigeria today, it is very important that you understand that in the past, okay, lands were owned by the indigenous families dwelling in that area or that have dwelled in that land. Okay, now not until 1978 when the Land Use Act was enacted. Okay, the Land Use Act simply vested every urban land to the state government of the state or to the state governor of the state. Okay, the governor was now in charge or was in control or was now holding the lands in these areas on behalf of the people. The governor or the government is now responsible for allocating any land in whatever area in the urban region actually to these people for actual usage or for whatever purposes they want to they are trying to use it for. Okay, it might be residential, it might be agricultural, or it might be commercial. Okay, but the long and short here is that the government is now the one in charge of the lands, no longer the people. A land can either be free or what we call under acquisition. When a land is free, from the word free, it means that government has not shown any interest in that land. But when a land is under acquisition, it means government has shown interest in that land, maybe for urban development or industrialization projects. Okay, now coming under acquisition, we can have two types of acquisition: the committed acquisition or the non-committed, which is also known as the global acquisition. When a land is said to be under a committed acquisition, it means that the government is trying to use that land for designated purposes. Okay, now it can be building of roads, it can be building of hospitals, it can be creating canals or training grounds from the military or whatever. Okay, but the first thing remains that the government has mapped out that land for designated purposes. Now, if you as an individual who has not made his research adequately goes to acquire such a land and starts building, or you start carrying out one project that you have in your mind on that land, that project or that building of yours is subject to demolition. The government comes and demolishes your building or your property or your investment without any form of compensation, and so you lose money. Okay, so it's why it's important to make adequate research before you acquire any land. Now, coming to the second, the non-committed or the global acquisition, it means that the government has not designated such a land for any purposes. Okay, now such a land can actually be made free. Okay, such a land can actually be made free by a process we call ratification or accession. Now, it is out of this land that the government can decide to say, okay, I want to lease out or I want to give out this to the people or to organization for whatever purposes they want to use it for. Okay, so having understood this, let's now jump into defining what land titles are and then listing the different types of land titles we have in Nigeria. Moving on to defining what land titles are. What are land titles? Land titles are simply the legal, I would say the formal documents that allows you the right of ownership or occupancy to a piece of land. Now, these documents actually outlines or shows all the rights you have, to owning that piece of land. Now, land titles also give you that authority to be able to transfer these rights or ownership to another person. Okay, aside from that, it allows landowners and buyers to be able to know their rights and boundaries as regards landed properties. Okay, so basically this is just all what land title definition wise is all about. Okay, it's not more than this. The very first land title on my list today is what is known as gazette. But before I go further defining and explaining what a gazette is, I'll need to explain what is known as accession. If we do not have a proper understanding of what an accession is, we might not be able to understand what a gazette is. Now, very quickly, accession is just a process whereby the government cuts out a parcel of land or an expanse of land that is under the global acquisition and gives it back to the community or a family that is interested. Okay, now during this process, a document known as the accession document is usually generated or formed. Now, this document is then taken to the Surveyor General's office, where it is then processed and it becomes what is called a gazette. Now, we can then say that a gazette is an official record book or an official document that clearly spells out all the details and recorded information of the accession process. Okay, or we say that the gazette is just an official record book that clearly states or spells out everything that has taken place during the accession process. Details like the community's name and the expanse or area of land that has been given to them. Okay, now one important thing we need to note is that the community in question can only decide to sell out lands within that amount of land that has been given to them. It might be an acre or a hectare by the government. It means they can only sell within that land that has been given to them. The community has no right or power to sell out of the land that has not been given to them. So you who is an individual is going to buy must verify and ensure that the land you are buying is within that has been given to that community by the government. The community head now can then decide to process, has the right or the power to process your documents, to sign it and process it and ensure that you are now the rightful owner of the piece of land you bought. Okay, now it is also important to note that as an individual who has obtained that land, you can then decide to process it further to obtain a C of O or a governor's consent, both of which we'll be seeing in a few. It means that the gazette is a powerful document on its own that gives you the power to then process either a C of O or a governor's consent. Okay, now guys, that is what a gazette and accession is all about. Alright guys, so the next title on my list is the C of O. Now, the C of O is a short form of what is called the Certificate of Occupancy. Now, this is a very popular land title. You must have been hearing about C of O, even if you're a novice, okay, in real estate or land matters, okay. Now, it's the most popular, the most essential, and actually the most powerful land title you can have for your land. Now, the C of O is just an authorized or a legal document, okay, that is issued by the federal or state government to individuals or to a group of individuals or to an entity or an organization, okay, that indicates their rights of ownership or their rights of occupancy for a particular land within a period of 99 years. Now, after these 99 years, they can now go back and renew their rights of ownership for that land. Okay, in case what I've said has confused you, very simple. The C of O is a legal document that spells out or indicates or certifies an individual the legal status or ownership status for a particular land. This document indicates that you have the right of occupancy for that land that you have bought from the government, but the government is leasing that land to you for a period of 99 years. Okay, now this is in accordance with the Land Use Act we saw earlier, that clearly says that the land that is purchased by the government, from the government rather, is purchased or gotten or obtained for a period of 99 years. The government leases that land to you for a period of 99 years, after which you go back and renew your right of ownership for that land. Okay, so with the C of O, that land is safe to invest upon. With the C of O, that land has no issues. With the C of O, you can enjoy the benefit of getting a collateral from a bank. Okay, with the C of O, land disputes are settled easily. With the C of O, you have the right to exercise control over your land, whether you are using that land or you're not using it. Okay, with the C of O, you can do so many things. Okay, so any land that has a C of O, most times is the most expensive land ever. Okay, it's usually the most expensive land. So check and make your research. You will see what I'm saying is true. Okay, now the C of O is one document that takes time to get. In Lagos, I think it's about 18 months now. That's a year and a half. Okay, and it's something that takes time to be processed. But when you get it, you are sure of getting the best land title ever. Moving on to the next title, we have what we call governor's consent. Now, governor's consent, very quickly, refers to the approval of a governor of a state on the transaction concerning a land between one person and another person. Now, until there is a consent or there is an approval, okay, from the governor, that transaction that has occurred between those two people can never be seen as legal. Now, let's take for instance, if Mr. A that has a land with a C of O decides to transfer his land or sell his land to Mr. B, who is the buyer, before that transaction that involves the transfer of the right of ownership from Mr. A to Mr. B can be seen as legal. Before that transaction that involves the transfer of the right of occupancy can be seen as legal, Mr. B needs to obtain a governor's consent, a governor's approval. Governor's consent simply means the governor is consenting to that transaction. That is just what it means. Until Mr. B obtains that governor's consent, that transaction between him and Mr. A can never be seen as legal. It is not valid. Another beautiful thing about the governor's consent is that it can occur multiple times. Mr. B tomorrow can decide to say he wants to sell or transfer his land or the right of ownership or right of occupancy to Mr. C. And Mr. C then has to go and obtain a governor's consent before that transaction between him and Mr. B can be seen as legal in the eyes of the governor. Basically, that is what governor's consent talks about. If it occurs continuously, then it has to be a repeated approval of the governor concerning that land. Now, this is quite unlike the C of O that occurs just once. You can never get a C of O twice. It has to be once. Okay, while the governor's consent can be done multiple times. So guys, that's basically what the governor's consent is all about. Let's move on to the next title. To the next title, we have the deed of assignment. Now, the deed of assignment occurs between two parties. Okay, it is that document that indicates or shows the agreement between the owner or seller of a property and the buyer. Now, what happens is that this document clearly shows that the seller or the owner of the property has transferred all his rights, title, interest, and ownership to the buyer. Okay, now the deed of assignment is usually prepared by the buyer's lawyer and then executed by both parties when properly vetted. Now, information concerning both parties, description of the property being sold, the subject of that transaction, and then the dates that transaction has taken place are usually contained in this document, the deed of assignment. And when this document is then duly taken to the land registry for proper registration, okay, of course with the governor's consent, now there is a clear indication that that property is now completely and legally owned by the buyer. So guys, that's just basically what the deed of assignment tells us. Okay, that transfer of rights, transfer of title, transfer of ownership, okay, from the seller to the buyer. To the next titles, I will explain the grant of probate and the letter of administration. Now, first, the grant of probate. I'm going to explain that this way. When a person that has an estate dies and leaves behind a will, that will is supposed to be executed by somebody known as the personal representative or a legal executor. Now, that document that enables that person or gives that person the authority to be able to carry out all the provisions that are present in the will is what is known as the grant of probate. Now, two important things you need to note here is that there is a will present, and then the person that is the personal representative, the legal representative or executor, has to be present in the will, has to be named in the will as well. Do you understand? So, for the person to be able to have that authority or that power vested on him by the probate court, okay, the person needs what is called a grant of probate. Okay, now that will enable that person to be able to carry out everything that has been stated in that will. Now, the grant of probate also allows the executor to be able to carry out every other function he has to carry out when the person dies. But most importantly, it's for him to be able to carry out the provisions in the will, okay, all in essence of managing the estate of the deceased. Okay, so that is what the grant of probate talks about. Okay, the will has to be present and the executor has to be named in that will as well. Now, when the person dies without a will, the person is said to have died intestate. Now, if there is no will present, what is required is called the letter of administration. Now, this letter of administration is also a document that can be filed by any of the beneficiaries present in the will. Okay, now, if also there is no named executor in that will, or the executor declines from carrying out the provisions stated in that will, then a letter of administration is still needed. Two things: if there is no named executor in the will, or there is no will at all, or the person decides to say, okay, I'm not interested. So any of the beneficiaries can decide to say, okay, let us take up this issue, okay, and then they will be able to file for a letter of administration to be granted to them by the Federal High Court or probate court as well. Okay, so that's basically what is needed when it comes to grant of probate and the letter of administration. Now, the executor has a lot of work to do. Usually, it's very laborious. That is why some executors or some administratives, personal administratives that have been legally, stated in the will, can decline because it's a whole lot. Such as valuing the estates, informing financial institutions about the deaths of the deceased, preparing the beneficiary's mind, doing so many other things, paying off taxes and debts and what have you, so many duties. Okay, so but basically, one is needed when there is a will and the other one is needed when there is no will. Okay, so guys, these are all you need to know about land titles, okay, in Nigeria today. In case you get confused or you've forgotten all the things we've discussed earlier, you can please rewind the video to learn again. Now, what are other documents that you might need when trying to acquire a land? Check this out. Okay guys, so there you have it. You've been able to see the major land titles in Nigeria today. You've been able to define and explain what they are as well. Okay, so if you are out there, you're trying to go into real estate, you want to know more about land titles, or you're trying to understand the procedures that are necessary in land matters, okay, this video will give you a head start, okay, on doing that. You can actually make more research on one or two things online as well, but this will give you the head start to get the ball rolling. Okay, getting land titles can be very much frustrating, okay, especially here in Nigeria. So, but if you go through the right sources, you go through the right steps and procedures, you'll get the best documents ever. That's what we do right here in Create and Finish. You can hit me up if you want to get the right documents for your real estate or your land, okay, with the numbers right there in the description, and of course the ones showing on your screen here. Okay, will give you the best and the most genuine documents ever. Now, if you're also trying to invest, you're trying to buy properties, or you're trying to buy lands, okay, you can talk to me too. Okay, let's discuss. Send a DM and let's discuss and get you the best properties ever. For those here in Nigeria, please, for those here in Nigeria, or you are outside the country, you want to acquire properties here in Nigeria, hit me up right there in the DM and let's talk. We'll help you with the best documents. We'll help you with the best properties ever. Okay. Now, having said all that, do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell such that you get more videos like this, okay, to educate you and inform you on the right things to do about interiors, about business opportunities, about investments, about real estate, so many things that are to come. Okay, so thank you very much. Always be good, stay good, and be the best you can be. Let's keep learning and let's keep growing together.